This time we'll have an invocation.
Please take a look at the person standing next to you, shake their hands. Spirit of life, for whom we have many names and whose spirit envelops us all, give your special blessing to those here today who willingly step forward to support and defend the nation they loved, even when they were not loved enough to be thought of as every person's equal. Where does our nation find such people of quiet heroism, of unflagging faith, that one day the freedom they helped secure for strangers would be theirs at home as well? What debt is owed to people of color fighting for freedom they could only hope for through both our major wars? And what glory is now our nation's heritage, that our military now fights our country's battles side by side, regardless of their skin color, their belief in God or the lack of such belief, and regardless of their sex or who they choose to love. Anyone who has worn this country's uniform knows the simple truth. Our warriors fight for those to their left and right, and for those they've left behind at home. Spirit of life, thanks for bringing us home. Remember those we've lost, and keep our military safe and sane and securely in our minds and hearts. Amen.
Amen.
At this time, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Present tongues. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order. Tongues. At this time, please remain standing for our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Want to go forward arms? Prepare to retire colors. Forward. Hook.
Okay, we'll now have the welcome by President Darrell Stevenson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all for coming. Colonel Baxter, thank you for coming from MacDill Air Force Base. We really appreciate it on a Saturday afternoon. With your family, we appreciate it. My members know I'm not good at this, but Chester McKay, VFW Post, thank you. Thank you. Good job. I want to thank the veterans and the members and the board members for coming out, and JROTC, Gulf High School, thank you. we're all about here is rubbing elbows with the young folks, so we really impressed by you guys coming out. And I really like our young people to rub elbows with some of the folks involved with the club. And now you can see some of those members here, right? Some good folks. These folks are veterans, and after they've served, are giving back to their communities for you guys, because they want you guys to be the best that you can be.
Amen.
But I'm going to keep it short, but I just want to tell a story how veterans affect me. I grew up in a barbershop. Anybody from Long Island? Long Island, little town on Long Island. I'm from Amityville. But my father, the man who raised me, owned a shop for 37 years. And I was there, hanging out there in the 60s and 70s. And his friends were vets. You know, he was a World War II vet. So I was always around these veterans. And I remember guys coming home. And I remember him saying, man, he's having a rough time. And I remember these young guys, I used to stand outside and watch people walk up and down the sidewalk, and they had the green jacket on, it wasn't camouflage back then, it was just green. And fatigues, yeah, and I see these guys walking down, and they weren't injured, at least they didn't seem like they were injured. To me, they weren't injured, but they were injured. Now we call it PTSD. You know, and I would see the same guy another day, and he was having a bad day to the point where I see him coming down the sidewalk. I remember one in particular, Charlie. And I would go back in the shop. And I remember my father cutting his hair, and he would just sit there and not say a word. These were veterans. Those are Vietnam vets that I crossed paths with, and World War II vets. And one person in particular, her name was Nancy Lieutenant. She was a friend of my father's. And from Amityville also. Anybody hear of Nancy Lieutenant? I'm going to read something real quick. Nancy Lieutenant, one of my heroes, in 1948, Nancy Lieutenant became the first black member of the regular Army Nurse Corps in March of that year. She was a graduate of Lincoln Hospital School for Nurses in the Bronx, New York, which enrolled primarily minority students. She joined the Army Reserve Nurse Corps in February 1945. At the time of her enlistment, black nurses were not highly regarded and were not given the status of regular nurse. But in 11 months, she was promoted from second to first lieutenant. Her performance as a nurse was no doubt a factor in the acceptance of her 1948 application for admission into regular Army Nurse Corps. During her service career, she was a U.S. Air Force flight nurse. Lieutenant retired from the Army with the rank of major in 1965. She worked from 1971 to 1984 as a nurse at Amityville High School in New York, having moved to Long Island where she left the Army. She achieved another first as the only woman to be president of the Tuskegee Airmen Association. She was president of that group from 1989 to 1991. So that's somebody who, you know, is one of the folks that were veterans that my father exposed me to. Almost all these folks that he exposed me to happened to be veterans. I didn't get to meet Miss Lieutenant's brother. He was a Tuskegee Airman. He was a red tail. He was lost, I think it was 1948. He and another fellow pilot collided during an escort, and he was lost forever. Those are heroes in my town, and those are people I looked up to, and those are veterans that I've known about. So that's just my little tidbit on veterans and how they've affected me. I remember shining shoes in my father's barbershop, and a retired master sergeant, he became a cop and then a detective, and I used to shine his shoes. And I remember I'm down there shining his shoes, and I see a gun sticking out from his ankle. And I'm like, and that was before I knew my father. Said, oh, he's a cop. And then I talked to him about it, and I ended up going into law enforcement because of these people that I exposed myself with. So when I think about those guys that used to walk down that sidewalk, and I wonder where they're at and how they made it, if they made it. I don't know. Sometimes I think a lot about that, those guys. Now that I'm their age, well, I'm older than they were back then, but I just wonder where those guys are and did they make it. past what I saw of them. That's why I love my veterans. I love you guys. Thank you for coming out, and I'm going to give it back to Dan because I'm not good at this. Thanks again for coming out.
Before introducing our keynote speaker today, Lieutenant Colonel Derek Baxter, I'd like to take a moment to honor someone who's here with us today. He's from a pioneering Pasco County family. Walter Mallet served in World War II on board the Fort Ticonderoga. It was hit by kamikazes, and Walter managed to save many, many lives that day and earned the Silver Star. He also earned 16 months recuperating in hospitals from the injuries he suffered. Would you stand up, Walter? I'm pleased to say that our country recognized Walter's service very recently. He was honored with a trip to the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Where he represented.
Yeah, he represented Pasco County.
No, the Navy.
Pardon? The Navy. Wow, that's awesome. Well done. I want to thank Ed White for being here today from the American Legion Post, Paradise Post. He's been helpful to us over the years. The African American Club of Pasco is privileged to have as its keynote speaker today at our Salute to Veterans, Lieutenant Colonel Derek Baxter, currently serving as Joint Operations Planner for the U.S. Central Command, located at MacDill in Tampa. Colonel Baxter was born in Montgomery, Alabama, and he and Walter had a long discussion. They both knew the territory that they were in Alabama that he was from. And Colonel Baxter is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. He has served in many armored units as a tank platoon commander, a company executive officer in the 10th Cavalry Regiment located at Fort Knox, Kentucky. He also served in the 3rd Brigade, the 1st Armored Division at Fort Riley, Kansas, as both a brigade plans officer and a company commander. Among his other duty stations are Fort Polk in Louisiana, the American Embassy in Cairo, the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment at Fort Carson, Colorado, and the U.S. European Command in Stuttgart, Germany. Colonel Baxter had a deployment to Iraq where he served as executive officer for the 2nd Squadron, the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And more recently, he served in Afghanistan with the 2nd Stryker Brigade, the 2nd Infantry Division. Colonel Baxter's awards and decorations include the Bronze Star Medal, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Joint Service Achievement Medal, the Parachutist Badge, which I also have, and the Air Assault Badge. Well done, Colonel. The Colonel is married to the former Maria Cecilia Gargladone, my apologies, in Asuncion, Paraguay, and they have 3 daughters, and 2 of the daughters are here with us today. Thank you for your service to our nation, Colonel Baxter, and thank you for being here with us today. Lieutenant Colonel Baxter, ladies and gentlemen.
I have some prepared notes, and for the most part I will use these, so forgive me every now if I ad-lib, but please, if I go too long, feel free to stop me. As Mr. Callahan said, I'm assigned to United States Military, United States Central Command at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. And on behalf of General Alston and the Central Command leadership, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to address such an esteemed group, particularly on this salute to veterans. It is indeed my honor to stand before this group on this first day of Black History 2014. But before I begin my comments, I would like to thank the African American Club for what they do for the community and our country. For the actions that you take today impacts our future, as your president pointed out to the young group here. So I encourage you to take advantage of any opportunity you have to engage with these fine people, because they will help you as you go forward. So thank you for what you do. I would also like to thank Mr. Callahan, the Cubs correspondent and secretary, for the support in preparing for this event, the kind introduction, and to the Chester McKay Veterans of Foreign War Post 7987, Lieutenant Colonel Dennis Schweitzer, Indian. Thank you for the presentation of colors. And to Mr. Darrell Stevenson for your leadership for this group. To the African American Club veterans, honorees, American Legion Paradise Post 79, and the Marine Corps League personnel, the Gulf High School Naval Junior ROTC, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In a few moments, the members of the Gulf High School ROTC will present to you brief biography on members of this community who have served the nation in military uniform. But before they do their presentation, I would like to share some thoughts on others who have distinguished themselves throughout our country's history. And I hope my comments will be of value. When given the opportunity to serve, men and women of color, both free and slaves, have served with honor. The contribution of blacks to the United States military are rich and many, and I hope my brief comments will do them justice. The first pioneers of blacks in service to the nation were members of the 1st Rhode Island Regiment. This unit consisted of slaves who enlisted to fight for the state while it was still occupied by the British. Notable units from the Civil War period include the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, the 1st Louisiana Native Guard, and the 54th Massachusetts. Most may be familiar with the 54th because it gained a lot of popularity from the 1989 film Glory that starred Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and Matthew Broderick. But it was based on that actual unit. All these units consisted of both slaves and free men. But the thing of note is that the 1st Louisiana Native Guard was the only unit that had black officers at the time. All others were commanded by white officers with black enlisted personnel. The last group of unit pioneers, as I see them, I'd like to highlight is the Montford Point Marines. Although this unit did not, deploy work as a unit, they were the first group of blacks who were recruited to serve in the United States Marine Corps. And from 1942 to 1949, all blacks who were recruited went to Montford Point to train because they were not allowed to train with their white counterparts at Camp Lejeune and other places. Much like the contributions of the pioneering units, there are also pioneer individuals. Now, I use the term pioneer not based on a time frame, but those who were the first to achieve a status at the national level, so to speak. To begin with, in 1870, James W. Smith was the first black to be accepted to the United States Military Academy. But it was not until 1877 that the first black would graduate, and that was Henry O. Flipper. All underwent trials during that time, being ostracized by their classmates. And of course, although Lieutenant Flipper was commissioned, he felt some of the same continued prejudice problems that he did as a cadet as he was an officer. Colonel Charles Young, the third black graduate, was the first black to achieve the rank of colonel in the United States Army. Benjamin O. Davis Sr., was the first black general officer in the United States Armed Forces, making the rank of brigadier general in the United States Army. And his son, Benjamin O. Davis Jr., became the first black graduate of the United States Military Academy in the 20th century, graduated in 1936. And of course, he was the leader of the famed Tuskegee Airmen, the 99th Pursuit Squadron, and the 332nd Fighter Group. All of these men endured extreme situations, and their sacrifices have led to great gains, not only in our military, but other areas as well. In addition to these mentioned, there are many more pioneers from various fields of concentration that have contributed to the advancement of black causes in the United States. This group of pioneers, both units and individuals, set the conditions for the bedrock group to form. Now, like I said, those were a number of firsts, not the only first, but just a significant number of the achievements. The group that I call the bedrock were those who built upon that and continue to do great things. The organizations that I associate with the group of the bedrock group includes the 38th, 39th, 40th, and 41st Infantry Regiments, the 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments, which were all brought into service in 1866. Also includes the 92nd and 93rd Infantry Divisions, as well as the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion, which was the first and only all-black airborne unit, also known as the Smoke Jumpers. They received that nickname because after they had completed their training, although they were prepared to deploy, they sent them out west instead to fight fires that were set by the Japanese. And so in order to effectively at that time fight the fires, they physically had to jump. So these airborne individuals went out, fought the fires in the west to support their effort, to the nation's war effort. I will highlight the 9th and 10th Cavalry, once because I'm a cavalryman myself, being the first black cavalry regiments. As I pointed out before, there have been a number of black infantry regiments throughout the nation's history, going back as early as the 1700s. But the 9th and 10th Cavalry were the first black cavalry regiments. To me, this demonstrated the increased, and although not complete, trust the military was extending to blacks. This was their ability to participate in the more complex situations associated with mounted maneuver. The 9th and 10th Cavalry also are the source of the nickname associated with blacks in the military today, being the Buffalo Soldiers. It was on the plains of the United States that the Native American Indians gave the name to the black cavalrymen due to their dark skin, curly hair, as well as their bravery and fierce nature, which reminded them of the buffalo. The cavalry regiments would participate in the Indian campaigns, the Spanish-American Wars, and the Mexican expeditions. The first black infantry divisions participated in World Wars I and World War II. Many were assigned to manual jobs because even though there had been significant improvements in terms of the treatment of blacks, we still were not considered equals. And they were not felt capable to serve in combat units. It was often said that blacks will buckle under fire, they will not stay in the fight. And we all know that was incorrect. The 92nd and 93rd, in addition to the U.S. units, many also fought with French units. And actually the battalions that fought with the French unit probably received some of the most high recognition during the war. Continuing the tradition of dedication, loyalty, and sacrifice to the nation, notable individuals of this group include Benjamin O. Davis Jr., which I've mentioned already. But Benjamin O. Davis Jr. became the first black general officer of the United States Air Force. The Air Force originally was a part of the Army called the Army Air Corps. But when it split, B.O. Davis Jr. was the first general officer and achieved the rank of lieutenant general before his retirement. General Daniel Chappie James Jr. was the first black four-star in our military. He was a four-star in the United States Air Force. General Roscoe Robinson was the first black Army four-star general. And of course, everyone knows Secretary of State Colin Powell, who was also a black four-star general, the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then the Secretary of State. These men and numerous others contributed significantly to ensuring that black Americans would be afforded to serve in areas of greater responsibility and complexity. They performed well both in uniform and beyond, similar to the honorees sitting before you today. The final group that I will recognize is what I call the future group. I define this group to include members of the Bedrock, but also men and women who are wearing and who have worn the uniform since the mid-1980s. We must continue the legacy of dedication to duty, service to country, and community, so that many before us who have fought and died, we must ensure that we are the example for those who will follow, such as these fine cadets standing up with us today. Like the men before you today, we must endure and flourish, both in uniform and out. To the veterans of the African American Club of Pasco County, I salute you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, Colonel Baxter, for those inspiring words. If I could ask the cadets to come forward. Yeah. Ensign Carruthers, would you introduce the cadets? All righty.
This is Seaman Recruit Flores. This is Seaman Apprentice Suarez. And this is Seaman Recruit Hernandez. What's her name?
Thank you So the first person we want to honor is Major Al Cade. Would you come up, sir? We also have this picture here. Now, who would like to read the biography? Good. Okay, there you go. Major Cade.
Major Al Cade. On February 20th, 1942, at the age of 17, Al Cade enlisted in the segregated U.S. Army. When asked at Fort Dix if he had any prior military training, Al informed his drill instructors that he spent 2 weeks in a New York State Guard before being thrown out when they discovered he was only 15 years old. During basic training, Al would watch as white soldiers were transported by trucks while African American soldiers had to walk. The post exchange had two sections, one for white troops and German prisoners of the war, and the other for African American soldiers. Despite repeated instances of racism, Al advised through the ranks, rising to the rank of major and commanding 2 battalions, and with a tour of duty in Vietnam, receiving the Bronze Star. He spoke fluent German and Japanese and served several generals officers as their electronics expert. Though Al Cade's childhood began as a runaway homeless orphan, he would retire to head to the nation's largest work-supported program and his own federal contracting company.
Thank you so much, sir. Great. Okay, we'll take these off your hands. Thanks, Mark. Yes, sir. Unless you have a few words you'd like to say. Thank you, Major. The next person we'd like to honor is our President, Darrell Stevenson, Sr. Okay, we're lucky to have 2 photographs, both of them fairly large, which sort of goes with the person. Here's one. Okay, Darrell Stevenson.
My hometown in North Amityville, New York. My name is Darrell Stevenson Sr., and I am from the Montaukett Indian Nation. I enlisted in the United States Army Reserve's Military Police Corps as a junior in high school, assigned to the 423rd MP Company. I attended weekend drills, and upon completing my junior year, June of 1982, I reported to Fort Dix, New Jersey, for basic training. Upon graduation from basic, I reported back to high school for my senior year. I attended weekend drills and deployed to Germany for annual training. I graduated from high school in June of '83 and reported to Fort McClellan, Alabama, for military police training. I graduated from MP school and returned home. I remained in the reserves, and in 1984, I applied and was accepted as a volunteer firefighter in the North Amityville Fire Company. In 1986, I requested a release from reserve status to pursue an active duty career, and it was approved. I arrived in July of 1986 to my first active duty station, the 2nd Military Police Company, 2nd Infantry Division, Camp Casey, South Korea. During the 1-year tour, I performed law enforcement duties both on and off post, and was a member of the SRT Special Reaction Team. In August of 1987, I reported to Fort Hood, Texas, and the 401st Military Police Company, 720th MP Battalion, 89th MP Brigade. I patrolled Fort Hood as an MP, and in February of 1988, I was deployed with the 401st Military Police Company to Honduras, Central America, for Operation Golden Pheasant. Among a number of assignments in Honduras, I was a team and a squad leader on the QRF team, Quick Reaction Force, After returning to Fort Hood in the summer of 1988, I requested and was approved for Corrections NCO School in Fort McClellan, Alabama. I returned to Fort Hood after graduating and was assigned to the LEA Law Enforcement Activity and the IDF Installation Detention Facility, where I served as a Corrections NCO until I finished my active duty tour. In 1989, I returned home to North Amityville, New York. I had re-enlisted to return to my original Army Reserve Unit, the 423rd Military Police Company. My status as a volunteer firefighter was returned to active, and I applied for and was accepted as a trainee police officer with the Department of Defense. I was assigned to Nassau County, Long Island, New York. In December 1990, my unit was activated for Desert Shield/Storm. We returned from Saudi Arabia the summer of 1991. I returned to DOD as a patrolman, and in the summer of 1992, I was accepted to the Suffolk County Sheriff's Academy as a corrections officer. My assignments were numerous during my career, but included Department Honor Guard, investigations, Academy instructor, and SRT, Sheriff Recruit Response Team. I completed my term of service in the U.S. Army Reserves in 1999, retired from the Sheriff's Office in 2009, and after 25 plus years of service to North Amityville Fire Company, I am now a lifetime member.
Okay.
The next person we'll honor is Dan Limerick. And Dan, I'm not sure if we have a photograph of you here.
No, couldn't.
Oh, okay. Well, get your handsome self up here.
Danielle Limerick, U.S. Army, AAC member Danielle Limerick served in the U.S. Army from November 1958 to February 1962 and was honorably discharged as a specialist fifth class. He is thankful that his more than 3 years was served during the Cold War. Danielle's military service was primarily in Germany with the 8th Infantry Division, 28th Field Artillery Battalion, Fire Direction and Control FPC unit. The remainder of his military service was at Fort California. Danielle is currently the Vice President, Senior Financial Advisor at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, investing for individuals, small businesses, and corporations. He commutes to the New York City from his home in Mandalay.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, the next person is Gunnery Sergeant Horace Lazier. Up front, Gunny. Thanks for being here.
Gunnery Sergeant Horace Lazier says, almost 50 years ago, at the age of 17, I was inducted into the United States Marine Corps. Keeping me out of trouble on the streets of Philadelphia, after recruit training in Parris Island, I was outfitted a M60 machine gun squad of Golf 29. Second, Golf 29. Second, 9th Marine Regiment. We won numerous medals as a presidential unit citation, and we became known as the Walking Dead. We were last together in the Ashall Valley in the northern portion of South Vietnam. After being choppered out Hill 861 We were in a battle so fierce that we called our own artillery onto our position. We were rescued by troops of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Rangers, out of 45 men in our platoon. We were left with only 13 Marines still standing. The only operation we were cut off lost for 11 days, eating grass and snakes, etc. The bad water caused dysentery. I remember I thought about cannibalism. I thought about cannibalism. I prayed to the Almighty God after I was wounded in the face,
in the
groin, and my leg. After my return, the world we called home, I was placed in military police battalion after a burial detail, and then returned to Philadelphia, where we called baby killers. We drug addicts and people spit on our uniforms. I was proud to be a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant. Presently, I live in Holiday, attending Pastor Smart's Union Missionary Baptist Church. I thank God for Miss Diane, my fiance, for having me in her life.
Thank you so much, Kenny. I had an opportunity to attend memorial service for the 9th Marines after they came back to Okinawa from Vietnam. And there were just rows upon rows of helmets upon M14 stuck in the ground. Yeah. And I would say that the dead almost outnumbered the living in the military unit. Yeah. Kenny, glad you're here.
Yeah.
The next person we'll want to honor is Buddy Sachs. If you'd step up forward, Buddy. Do we have a photo of you as a young man?
Yes, up in the corner there, way up in the corner.
Oh, okay. Let me find it.
Because I was too handsome then.
In this picture right here. So we'll pass it around so you can see him up close.
You don't believe me, take this one, that's my son.
I'll start.
He's a striking young man.
Yes, for sure.
Well, let them hold it. Don't be so tight with it.
I enlisted in the U.S. Army August 4th, 1954 at age 19. I was assigned to basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and subsequently finished my MOS training in Aberdeen, Maryland. I spent Christmas of 1954 at the bottom of the military destroyer ship General Langford in my hammock, sick as a dog. The ship sailed toward its destination for 11 days. I arrived in Frankfurt, Germany, and began working as an Army tank technician. I transferred to Anua, 17 kilometers away, and was assigned to an infantry outfit, where I began work as a communications technician. I completed my service in 1957 and returned to the States as an E5 specialist. The remainder of my obligation in the U.S. Army was spent in active reserve for the following 3 years. In 1983, I joined the Army National Guard at the age of 45. And even at the age of 45, I was accepted based on prior service. I devoted 15 years as an E5 Specialist Guardsman and retired honorably in 1996 as a staff SGT.
Next person is me, Dan Gallagher. Let me get a photo. Thanks. Appreciate it. That's me before the grenade went off.
Annie said Buddy gave his son, she wants you to.
Oh, okay. And this is my son who retired as a chief warrant officer from the Army and is now working as a military consultant.
I joined the United States Marine Corps in 1963, shortly after graduating from college. In December, I became a second lieutenant with my first assignment as a platoon commander of the security Fort Montford Point. the former recruit training base for African Americans just outside Camp Lejeune in North Carolina when my platoon sergeant brought a PFC up on charges for firing his .45 caliber pistol into the ceiling of the guard shack. I investigated and discovered that the sergeant deliberately mistrained the young African-American enlisted man, so the racist sergeant was offered the choice between a court-martial or retirement. He chose to retire.
Wow.
I received 2 top-secret orders to go overseas with 28 officers under the leadership of Brigadier General Michael Ryan of Tarawa fame. We formed a new brigade on Okinawa, the 9th Marine Amphibious Brigade, with 4,000 men in Japan, the Philippines, and Vietnam. After numerous inspection tours, I requested assignment to the 7th Motor Transport Battalion, 1st Marine Division, as their supply officer, where I served from 1966 into early 1967. As civil affairs officer, I assisted the South Vietnamese people of Ngai during the war, and am proud of the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry I was awarded from coming to the aid of a nearby ARVN unit under mortar attack, and for intervening to stop the massacre of innocent Vietnamese men after several Marine officers were killed by a grenade by workers inside the barbed wire. Returning to civilian life, I was offered command of Marine Corps Reserve Rifle Company in Albany, New York, for training to become an 18th commander in the 19th Special Forces Group Airborne when the Marines failed to provide details about the assignment. I became the only fully qualified Special Forces officer in my unit, and among our missions was assisting the civilian authorities in quelling the riot or uprising at Attica State Prison in 1971. My men and I did our best to prevent the torturing of inmates. After the firing ended, and I later testified twice in federal courts on behalf of inmates who won their case after 28 years, my military career ended when I refused to wear the uniform of an Army officer after Lieutenant William Cawley was convicted and then freed after murdering hundreds of innocent Vietnamese men, women, and children.
Okay, thank you. My brother Johnny followed me into the Marine Corps and ended up going to the same area of Vietnam as I did. At that time, Agent Orange was being used a great deal. He came home, and within 3 years, he died of exposure to the Agent Orange. The next person we'd like to honor is Terry Klein, U.S. Marine.
Am I the last one?
Oh, no, we got a couple more. Sure. Terry has a poem that he'd like to recite about his Vietnam experience. In the meantime, I'll get his picture.
Go ahead.
You'll notice that his grandson, right here, looks an awful lot like him. Okay, would you like to recite the poem, Terry?
If that's what you like.
Yes, sir, that'd be great.
All right. Like many of the people that come home from Vietnam, when we got back here, people seemed to turn their back on us and everything. When I come back from Vietnam, a little stopover in Okinawa, I landed in the LA International Airport, and a Hare Krishna spit on me. When I got home, all my friends treated me like I had the plague. So one night, me and my best friend at the time, Jack Daniels, we sat down and we wrote this little poem to help us cope. I hope maybe you'll get a little something from it. I call it Ode to Jimmy. Jimmy was a friend of mine who died 40 years after the war was over from the war. I'm sure a lot of you understand what I'm saying. It goes like this, Ode to Jimmy. I've got to clear my mind and stop the tears like many of you. I have post-traumatic, so I have to really stop thinking. You can call me crazy, but I know who I am. In a place called Vietnam, a boy became a man. He didn't start no war, but he didn't run. Didn't want to hurt no one, but he had a gun. Didn't want a uniform, but he wore it with pride. Just to watch Old Glory wave, seen a lot of friends die. Didn't know no right from wrong, just him or me. All we ever thought about was the land of the free. And when you turned your backs, put our dead on a wall, we bow for our brothers there, but we're still standing tall. 'Cause we know when it's over, our last sortie run, God knows who I am. I'm America's son. Thank you.
Could you read that little biography?
Terry Klein, U.S. Marine. Terry Klein served in the United States Marine Corps, including a tour of duty in the Republic of Vietnam with an amphibious tractor company, 3rd Marine Division. A lifelong resident of Newport Richey, Terry is a former president of the West Pasco Historical Society.
The next person we'd like to honor is David Prace. And David Prace is also a former president of the West Pasco Historical Society.
There's a rumor going around that I was in the Spanish-American War.
Not true.
I enlisted in the United States Navy at the beginning of the Korean conflict in 1940.
Could you let one of y'all read that? Cause she talks too
soft.
She talks too soft.
Yeah, that's it. Sure.
There you
After induction, I was sent to the Naval Training Base at Newport, Rhode Island. This base had been closed for a number of years, and so reopened for the influx of new recruits. It was very accommodating. I was assigned to Company 37, 2nd Platoon. All told, we had 120 recruits in CO 37, 60 kids in each platoon. I turned 21 while in boot camp and was probably the eldest in the company. I remember voting for the first time via absentee ballot. By the time I finished boot camp, the company numbers were well into the 200s. After boot camp, a couple of kids had 3 assignments for school. All others were shipped overseas to Korea or to ships. I was sent to Patuxent River Naval Air Station in Maryland. Why? Who knows? That indicated that I wanted to strike for electronic technician. At Pax River, I found myself assigned to Squadron VX-4. I had no idea what it was for. VX-4 consisted of one 4-engined L-149 Lockheed and Constellation equipped with some electronics and had a mushroom antenna on top of the fuselage. We also had 3 gutted out B-17s. These were due for fitting out with electronics. However, this was never done during my year with the squadron. Later I found out that they would ultimately fly into hurricanes and gather data. In addition, there was a twin-engine 8-passenger plane used by the pilots to accumulate air hours. I had flown in this aircraft a number of times, even piloting it when the officers were finished with their touch and goes. Also flew in the B-17s, but the pilots wouldn't let me touch the controls. Later, I was sent to Pensacola, NAS, where I was considered naval pilot training. I decided that was not for me and was honorably discharged from the service with an eye towards going back to school and finishing my degree.
Now we have one remaining veteran who was too modest to submit a photograph or a biography. Eugene Scott, our founding president. Gene, what service were you in?
The Army.
The Army.
Good addition of whole family, Army, both brothers. One nephew went into the Air Force.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Gene. And thank you so much for
The POW MIA Remembrance Ceremony. As you enter the banquet hall this evening, you may have noticed a small table in place of honor. It is set for one. This table is our way of symbolizing the fact that members of our profession of arms are missing from our midst. They are commonly called POWs or MIAs. We call them brothers. They are unable to be with us this evening, and so we remember them. This table is set for one. Is small, symbolizing the frailty of one prisoner alone against his oppressors. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call at arms. The single red rose displayed in a vase reminds us of the families and loved ones of our comrades in arms who keep the faith awaiting their return. The red ribbon tied is so prominently on the vase is reminiscent of the red ribbon worn upon the label and breasts of thousands who bear witness to their unyielding determination to demand a proper accounting of our missing. The candle is lit, symbolizing the upward reach of their unconquerable spirit. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of their bitter fate. There is salt upon the bread plate, symbolic of the family's tears as they wait. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us this night. The chair is empty. They are not here. All of you who served with them and called them comrades, who depended upon their might and aid, and relied upon them, for surely they had not forsaken you, until the day they came home.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ensign Carruthers, and thank you, cadets, for being here. Just before the benediction, Colonel Baxter, if you could come up for a moment. We have a small gift for you. It's a book about the 82nd Airborne in Iraq. I hope you enjoy it. And there's an inscription inside. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, sir. Patrick, would you come up and lead us in prayer?
Let's bow our heads in the word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you.
Thank you.
For these salute that you've given to African American Club veterans this evening. Major Al Cave, Daryl Stevenson Sr., Daniel Limerick, Horace Leslie, Betty Sachs, Daniel Callahan, Teddy Klein, Lucian Scott, and David Price. We thank you in particular, dear Lord, for Betty Sachs. My wife and I recall that on Martin Luther King Day this year, we asked his wife, well, how was he and why he was not with us. She explained, and we told her that we'd be praying for him. Today, dear Lord, as his wife came in, Dottie, I asked, is Buddy with us? And she said, oh yes, he is. He's coming through that door there. Dear Father, we do thank you for the fact that you do hear our prayers, you do listen, and you do answer. We thank you, dear Lord, that He's as fit as He ever can be. We do thank you, dear Lord, for all these veterans who fought for us. Without them, we would not have this peace that we have. We would not be free. We would not be a democratic nation. We would not be the leaders of the world as we are seen today. We do thank you for them all, not only for black veterans, for white veterans too, for the Indian veterans, and all those who fought so that we might be free. We do pray, dear Father, that the souls of the faithful departed will rest in peace. Amen.
Amen.